Hello and good morning, friends. Today is our class on directive principles of state policy, and we will finish this whole topic of DPSP in three classes. Today will be the first class of it. Today we are going to get an introduction of the DPSP, and then we are also going to go through the Gandhian principles. So first you need to know what DPSPs are, directive principles of state policy. So simply you can call them DPSP in order to remember better. So this phrase, directive principles of state policy, denotes the ideals that the state should keep in mind while formulating policies and enacting laws. So whenever the state is formulating some kind of policies or it is enacting laws, it has to make sure that it is keeping these principles in mind. We will understand what these principles are. So right now, whenever the government has to form a law, like there is a Mandrega scheme going on, so it has to keep in mind the welfare of the people, because this welfare is also a directive principles. Understand the meaning. Directive principles of state policies, those principles that direct the state policy, the formulation of the state policy, this is directed by these principles. This shows the importance of this principle. They are enumerated in 36 to 55 number articles. Now, these are constitutional instructions. Constitutional instructions means that they are given in the constitution. Instructions or recommendations, like suggestions, to the state in legislative while making the law, executive while implementing the law, and administrative while administrating the matters. So in all of the spheres of the state action, the state has to keep these principles in mind. And these principles, where do they come from? They are borrowed from the Irish Constitution. And it was not like the invention of the Irish Constitution either, because the Irish Constitution had copied it from the Spanish Constitution. For the matter of fact, we should remember that the DPSPs are taken from the Irish Constitution. Now, that is one thing, that is the place from where they have been borrowed. Now, they resemble the instrument of instructions enumerated in the Government of India Act of 1935. It was not like a whole new thing for India. The directive principles were already there. The instrument of instruction were already given in the Government of India Act of 1935, which was passed by the British Parliament for better governance in India. There were multiple laws passed during the colonial times. This was one of the most important laws, and in this law there was, a lot of our constitution, a lot of the features of our constitution have been borrowed from this GOI Act of 1935. So the instrument of instructions were also there. They resemble similar to the DPSPs, but the DPSPs, if there is a question where they have been borrowed from, then remember that they have been borrowed from the Irish Constitution. What do they resemble? They resemble the instrument of instructions that were enumerated in the Government of India Act of 1935. Why are these principles there? Why the reason? What is the reason behind this? The reason is that they seek to establish the social and economic democracy. We have learned a lot about equality, freedom in the fundamental rights, and we also in the criticism point learned that there were no economic rights, there were no right to work or employment. So those things are here. They are in the directive principles of state policy. So these DPSPs, they seek to establish social and economic democracy in the state. Now, Article 37 itself says that these principles are fundamental in the governance of the country, and it shall be the duty of the state to apply these principles in making laws. These principles are fundamental in the governance of the country. When you are governing the country, these principles are very important. These are fundamentals. These are the basic lines of your formulation of policies, and it shall be the duty of the state. See, these are the duties of the state to apply these principles in making laws. This shows their importance. And now we are going to understand what these principles really are. What do these principles actually say? So these principles are roughly divided into three categories. We have socialist principles, we have Gandhian principles, and we have intellectual liberal principles. First, we are going to learn about the socialist principles. Socialist principles are called so because they have a tone of socialism into them, tone of equality, tone of welfare, tone of employment and economic welfare, mostly something that supports the working class, the people who work, people who are poor and work, those people. So this is the socialist principles. First, the first principle is here: to promote the welfare of the people by securing a social order permeated by justice, social, economic, and political, and to minimize inequalities in the income status, facilities, and opportunities. First of all, when the government, when the state is forming a policy, what it has to keep in mind? Whenever it is trying to form a policy, it has to keep in mind that those policies should be implemented, should be formulated in such a way that they're going to promote the welfare of the people. Welfare of the people. How? By securing a social order permeated by justice. A justful order. There should not be discrimination. Social, economic, and political. And to minimize inequalities. There were inequalities, there were a lot of inequalities, very high inequalities at the time of 1947, and they still are, and sometimes people say that they are on the rise. But this is the duty of the state to formulate its policies in such a manner that those policies actually helps in minimizing the inequalities of the people. Inequalities in the terms of income status. It's not like one person is earning in lakhs or crores and the other person barely makes enough to feed himself. So there should be policies that all of these inequalities could be minimized. Income, status, facilities. Like one person is living in AC room, he has everything luxury, he has his own plane and everything, and other person we saw in the lockdown time, there were migrants who were pedestal, who were walking on their feet every day. So those kind of things, those kind of facilities, inequalities should be minimized, and also opportunities as well. The next is to secure the right to adequate means of livelihood for all citizens. Okay, adequate means of livelihood. Second, the equitable distribution of material resources of the community for the common good. What are the resources? Like land. First of all, simply, land should be equitably distributed. It should not be that one person has thousands of acres of land and the other person does not have any patch of land at all. So what he's saying that these resources of material gain, these resources should be distributed in equal manner for the common good of the community. This is how should you frame your policies, and they did. Indian government passed the land reforms bill, and they were quite successful in West Bengal and Kerala, where the land was redistributed more equitable. Now, prevention of concentration of wealth and means of production. If one person owns a lot of wealth and means of production like capital, labor, and land, then that person may have monopoly. It may start dictating terms. It may start to control prices. So that this concentration of wealth and means of production should be prevented. Equal pay for equal work for men and women. Doesn't that seem a lot of logical? I mean, this is a right thing to do. There should be equal pay for equal work regardless of the gender. If woman is doing something and the man is doing the same thing, they should both be paid equally. So the government, the state, has to form such policies who adhere to this principle. It cannot pass cannot pass any policies such as that increases the discrimination on the basis of gender or anything. Next is preservation of health and strength of workers. Well, when the workers are going to be strong and healthy, that means there will be a lot of production as well. So their health and working conditions should be taken care of. There should be good working conditions in the factories or anywhere else where their place of work. There should be humane there, and a lot of care should be taken for their health and strength. Next is that the children against forcible abuse. We also learned about how children cannot be employed in factories below the age of 14, and the opportunities for healthy development of children. In India, 14% of the children are malnourished. They're not eating what they should eat. They're not getting enough food. So in the midday meal scheme, you might have heard about it. The midday meal scheme, that passing of that scheme, the formulation of that scheme is getting its power from here. This is the reason, because it is one of the directive principles of state policy, the principles that direct the formulation of the policy, that healthy development of children. That's why there is this midday meal scheme, that provides children with food and nutritious food so they could develop themselves, they could develop their health. And this is where they are taking it from. The next is to promote equal justice and provide free legal aid to the poor. Equal justice should be equal, everyone should be treated alike, and to provide free legal aid to the poor. Well, even if you give rights to everyone, the poor who has no means to reach in court, how he is going to defend his rights? For that, there should be the provisions of free legal aid. When you cannot afford a lawyer, the state will provide you a free lawyer. And that is because this of the principle is asking the state to do it. Now you will understand how everything works. Alright, now we will end the class after this one. To secure the right to work, to education, and to public assistance in cases of unemployment, old age, sickness, and disablement. You might have heard about the old age pension scheme, or unemployment allowance scheme, or the scholarships that a lot of brilliant students get during their education, and the right to work. These things are given here in the directive principles of state policy. This is why the government has to do this, because they are given in the constitution. Now, to make provision for just and humane condition for work and maternity relief, we have already done this. If the workers are working somewhere, it is very important to give them a better working condition at their place of work. Also, women should be given maternity relief, and there is a concept of maternity relief in Indian laws, so that is something that we are already doing. Now, to secure a living wage of decent standard of life and social and cultural opportunities for all workers. You might have also heard about the lowest income, the lowest salary, the basic wages that have to be paid to a worker. Those basic salary, those basic wages laws are coming from here, because it is one of the principles. These principles are directing the state to do and form such a laws to secure living wage of a decent standard of life. Wage shouldn't be so low that you can just eat a day. However, we see such kind of things. We did see this during the lockdown, where the migrants were on the road, that they didn't actually had any savings, because whatever they earned, they ate it. That means they were not having decent standard of life. And this is one of the directive principles of the state policy, to secure a living wage for a decent standard of life. Next is to take steps to secure the participation of workers in the management of industries, to get them more into the working process. And the last one is to raise the level of nutrition and the standard of living of people, and to improve public health. And you are already familiar with the midday meal scheme and the ration scheme, the PDS, public distribution system, in which the poor section, the below poverty line section of the population is given wheat and rice and other grains on quite fair prices, quite low prices, to keep their standard of living up, to improve their public health. And then we have primary health centers, and then we have medicals and other hospitals that are funded by the government, and there are camps of polio. Sometimes you might have seen, or you might have actually taken those 2 drops of life that they talk about every Sunday or every fortnight. So those things are not just something that the government does. All right, one day government came up and thought, all right, let's do this. No, it's not like that. Next day government woke up and it said, no, let's not do it. It's not like that. These principles are directing the government to do this. These are given here, and according to these principles the state will do it. I hope you learned something from this, and we will continue our discussion in the next class, and probably we will try to finish in the third class. So see you in the next class. Thank you. Bye bye.